Morning coffee tastes like midnight regrets. Still I keep drinking both. I wake up before the sunrise, same time for 40 years. Pour the coffee black and bitter, stare at nothing and disappear. She used to make it with too much sugar, said I needed sweetening up. Now I drink it how I live my life, straight black from a chipped cup. Morning coffee, midnight regrets, same two things, I ain't quit yet. I don't know if that's brave or stupid, maybe both is what you get. Morning coffee, midnight regrets. One wakes me up, one won't let me forget. I had a dog named Hank for 15 years, best friend I ever had. He'd put his head on my knees when I cried and never told a soul about that. Now I talk to his picture sometimes, say, Hank, you lucky old ghost. You never had to drink alone or wonder who loves you the most. My brother called from Tulsa, said, Elias, you sound tired. I said, Jimmy, I've been tired since '85, but thanks for asking, I admire the way you still pretend I'm fine when we both know I ain't been right since Mama passed that winter and I held her hand all night. Morning coffee, midnight regrets, same two things, I ain't quit yet. I don't know if that's brave or stupid, maybe both is what you get. Morning coffee, midnight regrets. One wakes me up, one won't let me forget. There's a woman at the diner named Rose. She's 72 if she's a day. She brings my coffee before I order, never once asked me to pay. I leave a 5 on the table for her, even when I'm counting change. Some debts ain't about the money, some debts are too sweet to rearrange. You know what I figured out at 3 a.m. last Tuesday? Regret ain't the enemy, forgetting is. Long as I remember the bad nights, I still get to remember the good ones too. That's the deal, I didn't make it, but I signed it anyway. I used to think forgiveness was something you gave to someone else. Now I know it's a mirror you stare at until you forgive yourself. So here's to the man in the reflection, the one with the tired eyes and the shaky hands. He's still showing up every morning, and that's more than most folks understand. Morning coffee, midnight regrets, same two things, I ain't quit yet. I don't know if that's brave or stupid, maybe both is what you get. Morning coffee, midnight regrets. One wakes me up, let me forget. Some folks chase happiness. I just chase another sunrise. Same thing, if you think about it. Hank, if you're listening, save me a spot by the door. I'll bring the coffee. You bring the midnight memories.
Radio's still on the same station that she played back in '99. I don't even like the music, but changing it feels like a crime. I'm two-stepping with a broomstick, humming something I forgot. The dog just watches from the corner, judging every step I've got. I'm dancing alone in the kitchen, ain't nobody holding my hand, but the floor still knows the rhythm, and I'm still a dancing man. I'm dancing alone in the kitchen, not crying like I used to do. Somewhere between the salt and the sugar, I found a way to dance for two. My daughter called and asked me, "Dad, are you okay?" I said, "Honey, I'm still breathing, and I danced today." She didn't understand what I meant. She's 32 and runs too fast, but one day she'll be in a kitchen, dancing with a ghost from the past. I spilled coffee on the linoleum, the same spot she always missed. I laughed out loud for no one and wiped it with my fist. She used to yell, "Elias, use a rag." I'd say, "My sleeve works fine." Now I use a rag just like she asked, out of habit, not design. I'm dancing alone in the kitchen, ain't nobody holding my hand, but the floor still knows the rhythm, and I'm still a dancing man. I'm dancing alone in the kitchen, not crying like I used to do. Somewhere between the salt and the sugar, I found a way to dance for two. The refrigerator hums a tune, same one for 20 years. She used to sing along with it, off-key but sincere. Now I hum along myself sometimes, and I swear I hear her voice. The fridge don't care who's singing, it just hums and makes its noise. You know what I learned after she left? The secret ain't finding someone new, is loving the one you lost without losing yourself. She still dances here, just on a different beat now, and that's alright. I met a widow at the grocery store. She reached for the same can of beans. I said, "Excuse me, ma'am," and stepped aside. She said, "No, you go, I got time to lean." We talked for 10 minutes and now 4, about nothing and everything. She lost her husband 5 years back, said dancing alone is a funny thing. I said, "Yes, ma'am,
it sure is. And we both just stood there still. Sometimes two lonely people is all the company you need to heal. I'm dancing alone in the kitchen. Ain't nobody holding my hand, but the floor still knows the rhythm, and I'm still a dancing man. I'm dancing alone in the kitchen, not crying like I used to do. Somewhere between the salt and the sugar, I found a way to dance for two. I still leave space for her hand on my hip. It ain't there, it ain't there, but the space is. And that's enough to keep dancing. Yeah, that's enough. Yeah, that's enough.
Look at these knuckles, crooked and scarred. 30 years of swinging hammers in the yard. My wife used to say, Elias, your hands are rough. I said, baby, soft hands don't pay for enough. They held my firstborn daughter, trembled like a leaf in the wind. The nurse said, Daddy, you're gonna drop her. I said, ma'am, I'm scared of my own skin. But I didn't drop her, not once, not ever. And she's 37 now with kids of her own. She called me last week and said, Daddy, your hands are the safest place I've ever known. These hands ain't pretty, that's a fact, but they never took nothing they couldn't give back. They held a newborn, buried a friend, and they'll hold this guitar till the bitter end. These hands ain't pretty, no sir, but they're mine and they're sure. My son won't shake my hand no more. Says I work too hard for what? I said, boy, this callus on my thumb paid for every door you ever shut. He didn't understand the words I said, but that's alright. Maybe one day he'll wake up with his own sore back and know what I was trying to say. I shook hands with a man named Otis. He was 94 years old. His hand felt like leather and bone, and his grip was still solid gold. He said, son, these hands ain't pretty either, but they pick cotton, build a church, and raise 3 boys. The world don't care if your hands are ugly, it cares if they make noise. These hands ain't pretty, that's a fact, but they never took nothing they couldn't give back. They held a newborn, buried a friend, and they'll hold this guitar till the bitter end. These hands ain't pretty, no sir, but they're mine and they're sure. I fixed the sink last Tuesday. Took 3 hours and a lot of bad words. My neighbor came over to watch and learn. I said, son, the secret's getting your hands hurt. He laughed, but I wasn't joking. Every scar tells a story of trying. You wanna know who a man really is? Don't ask his mouth, ask what his hands have been lying in. You know what pretty hands do? Pretty hands wave goodbye. These hands stayed. They stayed for the dirty dishes, the late night feedings, the car that wouldn't start, the roof that leaked, the hospital bed. Pretty hands don't do that. Pretty hands hire someone else. I'm not someone else. I'm Elias, and these are my hands. I held my wife's hand when she left this earth. She squeezed back twice, then let go. The nurses said, "Sir, we're so sorry." I said, "Don't be." She's finally not in pain, you know. My hands went numb for 3 days after. Couldn't hold a cup, couldn't hold a door. Then one morning I picked up this guitar, and my fingers remembered what they were for. These hands ain't pretty, that's a fact, but they never took nothing they couldn't give back. They held a newborn, buried a friend, and they'll hold this guitar to the bitter end. These hands ain't pretty, no sir, but they're mine and they're sure. Pretty hands don't build nothing. Pretty hands don't stay. These hands stay. So go ahead, judge them. I'll be holding my coffee and my pride and my daughter's hand next Sunday. She asked me to walk her down the aisle again. Her husband's fine. She just wanted to hold my hand one more time. These hands ain't pretty, but they're the only ones she wants. Charlie died on a Tuesday. Heart just stopped in his sleep. His wife found him in his easy chair, TV still on, channels cheap. I sat in the back of the funeral home, couldn't walk up to the box. Men like us don't say goodbye, we just polish our boots and walk. I remember Charlie at 16, skinny kid with a crooked smile. He stole his daddy's truck one night and drove us 60 miles. We sat on the hood and watched the stars. He said, "Elias, you think this is it?" I said, "I hope not, Charlie." He said, "Me neither, not one bit." So here's to Charlie, last call, my friend. I'll drink your whiskey till my own end. You left too early, you left too quiet, but I'll raise hell in your memories right. Last call for Charlie. Bartender poured two, one for me, one for the ghost sitting through. Charlie got married in '87. I was his best man, scared to death. He looked at me before the walk and said, "Elias, don't you dare hold your breath." I laughed so hard the pastor glared. Charlie just winked and fixed his tie. We walked him down that aisle like soldiers, and he never once asked why. His wife called me last month, said Elias's chair is still warm. I didn't know what to say to that, so I just listened to the storm. She said he talked about you every day, even when he couldn't remember my name. That's the kind of friend, Charlie was your name. Was the last thing he'd ever lose to the rain. So here's to Charlie, last call, my friend. drink your whiskey till my own end. You left too early, you left too quiet, but I'll raise hell in your memories riot. Last call for Charlie. Bartender, pour two. One for me, one for the ghost sitting through. We used to fish the river every June. Never caught a damn thing, but Charlie would laugh and say, Elias, some days the catch is the singing. I ain't been fishing in 4 years now. Don't see the point alone, but I drove past the river last Sunday, and I swear I heard him on a stone. You ever lose someone and still hear their voice in a crowded room? That's not crazy. That's love not knowing when to quit. Charlie used to say, Elias, when I go, don't cry at my grave. Just have a drink and tell a stupid joke. So here goes. Why did the Scarecrow win an award? Because he was outstanding in his field. Charlie would have hated that joke, which is exactly why I told it. I went to the bar we used to own. Well, Charlie owned it. I just swept. It's a bank now, can you believe it? They put an ATM where we wept. I stood outside and stared at the brick. Remembered the night Charlie broke his hand, punching a wall because a woman left. I just handed him a rag and a rubber band. He said, Elias, I'm a mess. I said, Charlie, we all are. That's the point. He laughed and cried, then brought us both around. Best damn night in this joint. So here's to Charlie, last call, my friend. I'll drink your whiskey till my own end. You left too early, you left too quiet, but I'll raise hell in your memories riot. Last call for Charlie. Bartender, pour two. One for me, one for the ghost sitting through. Charlie, if you're listening, save me a stool. I'll be there soon enough. Not too soon, but soon. And when I get there, you better have a drink waiting and a stupid joke. Outstanding in his field. I still can't believe I said that. Yeah, last call for Charlie. But Charlie never really leaves. See you on the river, old friend. They wrote me off in 08. Said I'd never find my feet. Lost the house, lost the truck, lost the woman on the seat. But I found a job with a broken broom, sweeping floors nobody sees. 2 years later I own the building. Now I sweep it when I please. 98 I lost my daddy. 2000 lost my mom. 2005 my best friend Charlie. Felt like I was next in line for the bomb. But the bomb didn't come, or maybe it did, and I'm just still standing in the smoke. Either way, I'm breathing still, and that's the best kind of joke. I'm still standing, don't call it a comeback. I never left, just took a nap on my back. Life hits hard, I hit harder, slow. Still standing, watching the river flow. I'm still standing, that's all I got. Ain't a victory dance, just a steady walk. My knees pop when the rain comes, my back sings a broken tune. But I walk to the diner every morning and tip the waitress $1 for the spoon. She asked me once, Elias, you ever happy? I said, honey, happy ain't the goal. Just wake up and find one good thing, even if it's just a biscuit roll. I had a heart scare last November, sitting in the ER at 3 a.m. A young nurse looked at my chart and said, Mr. Vance, you're tough for an older man. I said, sweetheart, I ain't tough, I'm just too stubborn to lay down. And every time life counts me out, I get back up and walk around. I'm still standing, don't call it a comeback. I never left, just took a nap on my back. Life hits hard, I hit harder, slow. Still standing, watching the river flow. I'm still standing, that's all I got. Ain't a victory dance, just a steady walk. My daughter asked me, what's my secret? I said, baby, there ain't one. Some days you eat the bear, and some days the bear eats you, then you're done. But most days it's not about winning, it's about showing up in the rain. Put one foot in front of the other and refuse to be the one who complains. Comeback sounds like I left. I didn't leave. I just waited and waited people out. There's a difference. Leaving is a choice. Waiting is a weapon. I learned that from Charlie. He could outwait a rock. I went to my 40-year reunion. Everyone looked old and tired. They asked me what I do for work. I said, I'm still breathing, that's required. They laughed, but I wasn't joking. Some of our class ain't here no more. Tommy died of a broken heart, and Susan died on the factory floor. So standing here in this rented hall with these tired knees and this tired back, I'll take every single ache and pain over the silence of what I lack. I'm still standing, don't call it a comeback. I never left, just took a nap on my back. Life hits hard, I hit harder, slow. Still standing, watching the river flow. I'm still standing, and that's all I got. Ain't a victory dance, just a steady walk. Still standing, not pretty, not fast, not young, but standing. And some days, that's the bravest thing a man can be. Still standing, still standing. You came home with groceries yesterday, put 'em on the counter, same as always. I watched you from the living room chair and wondered how I got 40 years of grace. Your hair is gray now, mine is gone. Your hips hurt, my back's a mess. But when you laughed at nothing I said, I felt like a kid in a Sunday dress. Remember when we had no money and ate beans for 30 days? You said pretend it's steak, Elias, and I fell in love in 1,000 ways. We don't have to pretend no more. The beans are gone, the steak is here. But I'd trade it all for one more night on that broke down couch that year. 40 years of you, 40 years of me. We ain't perfect, but we're still free. We yelled, we cried, we stayed inspired and held each other through every night. 40 years of you, I'd do it again. Even the hard parts, even the pain. You broke your hip in 2010. I slept on the hospital floor. The nurses brought me a blanket. I said I'm fine, I don't need more. You woke up and saw me there, and you cried and said, Elias, go home. I said, woman, I am home, and I'm not leaving this alone. I forgot our anniversary last year. You laughed and said that's fine. You forgot it 2 years before that. I said now we're even, and that's a sign. A sign that we stopped counting the ways we failed and fell short. 40 years ain't about the dates you remember, it's about the days you didn't abort. 40 years of you, 40 years of me. We ain't perfect, but we're still free. We yelled, we cried, we stayed inspired and held each other through every night. 40 years of you, I'd do it again. Even the hard parts, even the pain. Our grandson asked us last Sunday, Grandma, how'd you stay so long? She looked at me and said, baby, love ain't a feeling, it's a choice when the feeling goes wrong. I almost cried in front of the boy, but I held it back and just squeezed her hand. She's right, you know, love ain't the fireworks, it's the person who still sits in the stands. Love ain't the fireworks, it's the person who still sits next to you when the fireworks are over. And the stadium is empty and the lights go out, and they're still there. 40 years, you're still here, and so am I. I wrote you a poem once, it was terrible, you said, bless your heart. Then you folded it and put it in your drawer, and I knew we'd never be apart. You still have that poem somewhere between your socks and your old love letters. You said, Elias, you ain't a poet, but you're mine, and that's better. I don't know what I did to deserve you. Maybe nothing, maybe grace just falls. But I'll spend whatever years I've got left trying to earn it in these
these halls. 40 years of you, 40 years of me. We ain't perfect, but we're still free. We yelled, we cried, we stayed inspired, and held each other through every night. 40 years of you, I'd do it again. Even the hard parts, even the pain. 40 years of you. Here's to 40 more. Or what have we got left? You just woke up and said, Elias, are you talking to your phone again? Yeah, I am. I'm telling the whole world that you're still the best thing I never deserved. Now go back to sleep, woman. I'll bring you coffee in 10 minutes. 40 years, and I still can't believe it. You came home with groceries yesterday. Put them on the counter, same as always. I watched you from the living room chair and wondered how I got 40 years of grace. Your hair is gray now, mine is gone. Your hips hurt, my back's a mess. But when you laughed at nothing I said, I felt like a kid in a Sunday dress. Remember when we had no money and ate beans for 30 days? You said pretended steak, Elias, and I fell in love in 1,000 ways. We don't have to pretend no more. The beans are gone, the steak is here. But I'd trade it all for one more night on that broke down couch that year.
There's a highway runs through Mississippi. I've driven it 1,000 times. Past the signs that say Jesus saves, and the billboards for cheap motels and cheap wines. I know every exit, every pothole, every diner that still serves pie. I've slept in my truck at the rest stops and watched the truckers pass me by. My daddy drove these same roads back when 55 was new. He'd bring me a stuffed bear from Chattanooga and a story about a man he barely knew. Now I'd drive him looking for his ghost between the mile markers in the rain. I saw a man who looked like him last Tuesday, but he was just a trucker feeling the same pain. Headlights and regrets, that's all I got. White lines on blacktop, a lonely spot. The radio plays songs from '79, and I sing along, 'cause it's easier than crying. Headlights and regrets follow me home. I got nowhere to go, but I hate being alone. I picked up a hitchhiker in Arkansas, young kid, maybe 22. He said, "Where you headed, old timer?" I said, "Son, I wish I knew." He laughed and said, "That's fair enough," and we drove for 50 miles in silence. Sometimes two lonely people ain't a problem, it's a kind of alliance. He got out in Little Rock at midnight, said, "Thanks for the ride, old man." I said, "Don't call me old, I'm just experienced." He laughed and waved his hand. I watched him walk into the neon lights and wondered if he'd make it home. That kid reminded me of me at 22, before the road had turned my heart to stone. Headlights and regrets, that's all I got. White lines on blacktop, a lonely spot. The radio plays songs from '79, and I sing along, 'cause it's easier than crying. Headlights and regrets follow me home. I've got nowhere to go, but I hate being alone. I stopped at a diner in Tennessee. Waitress named Darlene. She said, "You look like you've been driving for days." I said, "More like 40 years, if you know what I mean." She poured me coffee without asking and left the pot on the table. Some people don't need your story, they just know you're not a fable. You know what the highway taught me? There's no such thing as a wrong turn, just a longer way to get to where you're going. And sometimes, where you're going is just where you already were, but with different headlights. I've been running from myself for 30 years, turns out I was just driving in circles, and that's a long way to say nothing. I called my daughter from a truck stop, said, "Baby, I'm coming home." She said, "Dad, you said that last month." I said, "This time I mean it, I'm done with the roam." She paused and said, "Okay, Daddy, I'll leave the porch light on." I almost cried right there in the parking lot, standing by a dumpster at dawn. I hung up and stared at the sky, and for the first time in years I knew the highway ain't a home, it's just a place you go when you don't know what else to do. Headlights and regrets, that's all I got. White lines on blacktop, a lonely spot. The radio plays songs from '79, and I sing along, 'cause it's easier than crying. Headlights and regrets follow me home. I've got nowhere to go, but I hate being alone. I'm turning around tomorrow, not because the highway's done with me, but because I'm done with it. My daughter left the porch light on. After 40 years of driving, I finally figured out what that light meant. It wasn't a welcome, it was a promise. Someone was waiting. Headlights and regrets, I'll take both of them home now.
I saw the porch light from the highway, a tiny dot in a sea of black. I pulled the truck over on the shoulder,
'cause I wasn't sure I could make it back. 20 years since I walked out that door. Said I needed air, said I needed space. She didn't cry, she didn't yell. She just said, Elias, leave your keys on the fireplace. I drove to Memphis that same night. Slept in the cab till the morning came. I told myself I'd call her next week, but next week turned into years of shame. I sent a postcard from Nashville once, said I'm fine, don't worry about me. She never wrote back, I don't blame her. Some apologies ain't meant to be received. Porch light at midnight burns still. After all these years, after all this will, she left it on for a ghost like me. And I'm finally home, finally free. Porch light at midnight, calling me in. I don't deserve it, but I'm ready to begin. I heard she remarried in '99. A man named Robert, quiet and kind. I couldn't blame her, I was long gone. Just a bad memory she left behind. But Robert passed in 2015. Cancer took him slow and mean. I thought about going to the funeral, but I stayed in a motel in New Orleans. Last month my daughter found my number. Said, Daddy, Mama's not doing well. She won't say it, but she's been asking if you're still alive, if you're still in hell. I didn't know what to say to that, so I just listened to her cry. Then I said, baby, tell your mama I'll be there before the next July. Porch light at midnight burning still. After all these years, after all this will, she left it on for a ghost like me. And I'm finally home, finally free. Porch light at midnight, calling me in. I don't deserve it, but I'm ready to begin. I pulled into the driveway slow. The gravel was the same as '89. The trees were taller, the fence was rusted, but that porch light was still shining fine. I sat in the truck for an hour, watched the shadows move across the glass. Then I saw her silhouette in the window, and I knew this was my last chance to pass. You wanna know the hardest part of leaving? It ain't the leaving. It's the coming back and having to look at the face of the person you left and seeing that they survived without you. And somehow, that hurts worse. But she left the light on. After 20 years, she left the damn light on. I knocked on the door at midnight. She opened it slow, didn't say a word. She looked older, smaller, thinner, but her eyes were the saddest I'd ever heard. She stepped aside and let me in. The house smelled different, but the same. The same couch, the same photographs, just a different man in the frame. I said, I'm sorry, about 100 times. She said, Elias, stop, just sit down. I didn't leave the light on for an apology. I left it on so you'd remember this town. Porch light at midnight burning still. After all these years, after all this will, She left it on for a ghost like me, and I'm finally home, finally free. Porch light at midnight, calling me in. I don't deserve it, but I'm ready to begin. She made me coffee at midnight. Decaf said you don't need more reasons to stay awake. We sat on the porch, me and her, under that light. She said Robert was a good man, but he wasn't you. I didn't know what to say to that, so I just held her hand. 20 years, and that porch light never burned out. Some things just wait for you, even when you don't deserve it. I'm home. Last time I saw my father, he was sitting in a home. He didn't know the year or season, didn't know his hair was gone. He looked at me with empty eyes and said, "Son, do I know you?" I said, "Yes, sir, you made me." He said, "That's nice. What do you do?" I sat down in the chair beside him, the same chair my mother used. She passed 6 years before him, and I think part of him refused to stay in a world without her laugh. So his mind just packed and left, leaving his hands and his empty stare, and a body that felt like theft. The last time I saw my father, he was more ghost than man. I held his hand like he held mine when I was barely standing. He taught me how to throw a punch, how to fish, how to drive a truck. The last time I saw my father, I realized I didn't know him much. I remember him at 40, strong as oak, quiet as stone. He worked 12 hours at the factory, then came home and ate alone. He wasn't mean, he wasn't distant, he was just tired to the bone. And I was young and needed answers. He just gave me his paycheck and a groan. We never said I love you, not once in 40 years. But when I bought my first house, he showed up with a truck and 2 beers. He didn't say I'm proud of you, he just looked at the roof and said, "Son, the gutters are gonna need work, and don't forget to check the shed." That was his language, I know that now, but back then I wanted more. Now I give anything for one more. Check the gutters and a sore back from the floor. The last time I saw my father, he was more ghost than man. I held his hand like he held mine when I was barely standing. He taught me how to throw a punch, how to fish, how to drive a truck. The last time I saw my father, I realized I didn't know him much. A nurse came in to check on him, said, "Mr. Vance, time for your pills." He looked at her and said, "Who's Vance?"
and my heart stopped against my will. I said, "Daddy, that's you." He said, "No, Vance was my father's name." I didn't correct him, didn't have the heart. Some battles aren't worth the shame. You wanna know the worst part? Not that he forgot me, is that I spent 40 years trying to be nothing like him. And then I woke up one day and I was him. Same tired eyes, same silence, same check the gutters love. And he wasn't around to see it, or maybe he was, and he just didn't say anything, 'cause that's what we do. I stayed with him for 3 more hours, talked about the weather and the news. He didn't understand a word I said, but he smiled a few times, and I take that as a truce. Before I left, I kissed his forehead. He grabbed my wrist and pulled me close. He said, "Whoever you are, thank you for coming. You remind me of a man I used to know the most." I walked to my truck and sat there crying for the first time in 20 years. Not because he didn't know me, but because in some way he did, and that broke the veneer. The last time I saw my father, he was more ghost than man. I held his hand like he held mine when I was barely standing. He taught me how to throw a punch, how to fish, how to drive a truck. The last time I saw my father, I realized I didn't know him much. He died 3 weeks later in his sleep. I got the call at 4 a.m. I just sat on the edge of my bed and stared at the wall. I didn't cry, not then. I cried a month later in the hardware store, looking at gutters. The man next to me said, "You okay, mister?" I said, "Yeah, just checking the gutters." He nodded, like he understood. And that's when I knew I was my father's son. Check the gutters, son. That's all he ever